Nick Barisheff, welcome to Nature of Reality Radio. I saw your interview on, I believe it was Stansberry Investor, and I was very impressed with the things you had to offer, the things you had to say. I've been trying in more recent times to get a lot of guests on this show who can talk about the economy and the government and the state of affairs of the world today. Well, even a lot of folks in my audience in the spiritual, well, not religious community, I think could benefit from this because a lot of them seem to be too in la la land and they need to get more focused on down to earth, serious issues like this. And
Right.
someone like you is definitely worthwhile to talk about that. Just a quick little disclaimer to my listeners. I'm not going to bitch and moan again about nobody subscribing on Patreon to listen to my interviews early. I've done that enough. If you guys want to be patient with me and just wait 2 to 3 weeks after the interviews to see them and don't subscribe on Patreon just to listen to them early, I'm not going to complain. I can understand why you're doing that to save some money and all. But I do ask that all my listeners, please, after I upload the interviews to YouTube, I will upload them to cost.tv, and please listen to them on cost.tv and not YouTube. Listen to YouTube for only 15 seconds to give me a view credit, and then cost.tv, please, so I can get monetized using the blockchain, because that is a blockchain monetization channel. If you see the link in there, please listen to it on cost.tv. So now that I got that out of the way, Nick Barisheff, just a quick little introduction of who you are for the people that haven't heard about you. I guess you can plug your website and your contact info now at the beginning rather than the end of this interview now. And then we'll get into the really nitty-gritty, serious stuff about the government, the economy, the stock market, and all the things people need to be concerned about in this time of great challenge that we are living in. That has been, it's not just the pandemic. There's a lot more going on in this world that we need to be concerned about. So you got the floor. I promise to shut up and put myself on mute. I don't have Alex Jones-itis. I don't interrupt my guests. So knock yourself out. Please introduce yourself. You got the floor.
Well, I'm the CEO of BMG Group. It was a company I started in 1998 because in Canada there was no way to hold physical bullion in the registered retirement account. So I decided that the best way to do that would be through open-end mutual fund trust, and that took 4 years to negotiate the approvals with the Canadian securities regulators. Unlike the US, we have provincial regulators. There isn't a national regulator. So I did that, and we started the original fund, which was a gold, silver, platinum fund. And then later we created a gold only fund, and most recently a silver only fund. In addition to that, for high net worth individuals, family offices that don't need to buy a mutual fund, we have a physical bullion program called Bullion Bars. And we have clients all over the world with storage with bricks all over the world. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. When I started it, I didn't appreciate the difficulty. I thought once I had the funds approved, then sales would flow along, but nothing was further from the truth. So it was a very hard sell, educational sell. That's been the case for 20 years. And that's when I eventually put all my knowledge into a book, and we have the one book, $10,000 Gold. It's in a hard copy as well as an audio book. So that gives people pretty much the entire gold story, as gold as money.
Thank you. And gold's not the only precious metal worth talking about here, but it was that interview that you did on Stansberry Research. It was called The Road to $10,000 Gold, When and How. It's interesting I'm pointing this out because it was just yesterday on the Cambridge House International Inc. YouTube channel, which you've also been interviewed on. There was a guest who actually said he sees the dollar getting more valuable and he sees gold dropping to 1,300. A lot of the listeners gave that video a dislike. They did not seem to like what they were hearing, and I wasn't too impressed myself. But this idea of $10,000 gold, it seems kind of wishful thinking. But I do want to point out, though, And I actually managed to call into the Alex Jones show yesterday and tell Alex Jones something that former British politician Simon Parkes said about the guy who should be in the White House right now but isn't. And the reason he's not in the White House, of all the reasons, the primary number one reason is because he actually wanted to put America on the gold standard in his second term. And that's the one reason why he put a portrait of William McKinley up in the White House at the end of his first term. And the globalist bankers did not want that, and they did everything they could to make sure that voter fraud kept him out of the White House. But if the idea of $10,000 gold, one would think, oh, maybe if we have a gold standard, but as long as the bankers still have some control over America and the rest of the world, that ain't gonna happen. So what do you have to say about this thing about Trump?
So, because the issue is the bankers, and by bankers we're probably talking about Western bankers, and what you have to consider is what Russia and China are doing, and they're moving toward cutting away from U.S. dollar hegemony. Now both of them China is the number one gold producer in terms of mines, and Russia is number 2 or 3. Russia has been buying all the gold it produces, as has China, and they've also been buying gold. Now the trouble is that the official holdings of gold are reported by the central banks, and China purportedly has 1,600 tons. But based on a lot of imports, exports, flows, production, many analysts expect China to have more than 6,000 tons. And when China is ready to cut bait from the US dollar, that's when they're going to make the announcement. Now, the way they buy the gold is through the sovereign wealth funds, which China doesn't report anything to anybody. And they can move the gold holdings from the sovereign wealth fund to the central bank anytime they please. They're not going to do that for the time being while they're accumulating. And their goal is to have more than the US. The US purportedly has 8,000 tons. China intends to have 10,000. So when they get there, all the manipulation at the central bank level will be over, because the first thing that will happen is when the analysts look and see, well, where did you get 6,000 tons? Because all the bullion's being accounted for. CPM and GFMS both do very detailed studies, and they count down to the half ounce. So where did the 6,000 tons come from? And the answer is going to be that it came through central bank leasing, so that the gold that the Western central banks purport to have, they don't have. That's being leased and then shipped to China, and is now sitting in China never to come back. So at that point, there'll be no way to maintain the strength of the US dollar.
Yes, and is it true that when I say globalist bankers, many people would assert that that the bankers that control the politicians, like Goldman Sachs had controlled Mitt Romney and Barack Obama, gave them most of their funding during that election. Donald Trump wasn't really banker controlled. He had his own set of money that he could do. Oh my God, I shouldn't have said his name on this channel. I'm going to get blocked now. That's going to cost me. But anyhow, I'm really concerned about that. But do those same bankers, would it be fair to say that they also control the governments of the Far East as well, or is that a completely different faction of bankers that we're talking about, or is this not your area of research? Do you know anything about that?
In the Chinese, I don't think it's the banks that control everything in China. It's the Chinese Communist Party that runs the show there. and they are trying to divorce themselves from U.S. hegemony in terms of the dollar and the banking system and everything else. That's their stated goal. It's not a secret or anything like that. They've stated it numerous times.
Okay, and we are due apparently for something very, very big that people have been referring to as a Red Sea moment. How interesting that in the Red Sea right now in the Suez Canal area, there's some ships that are clogging up the global trade in that area. Funny coincidence. And Bo Polney has the biblical prophecy guy. He's been talking about the April 22nd through the 26th time period being this possible Red Sea moment. Do you have anything in your area of research that suggests something big is going to be coming in the next week or two?
Well, I've found that in the 20 years I've been doing this, it's almost impossible to predict things on the short term. I typically focus on the long term, and in the long term, you know, with my book $10,000 Gold, and when I wrote it in 2011, I sounded like a lone wolf in the wilderness. But now many people, you know, constantly predict 10,000. And some, like Jim Rickards, is talking 40,000, and Jim Rogers and so on, so that 10,000 is not so much out of line. But in order for 10,000 to happen, the US dollar has got to collapse. Now, whether it's, you know, like Bo Polney's predictions, whether it happens, you know, this month, this year sometime, but we've got the most vulnerable set of circumstances that I remember seeing in a long time. You know, on the one hand, you've got the stock market and a lot of real estate markets in bubble territory. Real estate's surpassed the 2008 highs. The stock market is, as a, you know, bubble level is equal to 1929. So we've got this kind of disconnect in financial markets, in Bitcoin. Gold has been gold and silver has been sort of flatlined for the last little while. But the real economy, particularly under the current regime, is dramatically getting worse. I mean, apart from the shutting down the pipeline, the open borders where they're letting all kinds of unskilled people into the country that don't speak the language. Biden's also stated that he intends to give free health care to all the illegals, both the ones that are here and the ones that are coming in. That alone will bankrupt the United States. Then you've got a complete distortion in many of the northern U.S. cities where crime is running rampant. It's escalated like nothing before, but the prosecutors aren't properly prosecuting. They're letting people out without bail on all the charges, and now we've just got a lot of illegals that are connected to the cartels. So this is going to be a real problem. And to add insult, Biden intends to restrict guns even further, so the honest citizens will be unable to protect themselves from the rising crime.
Yes, and
these two conditions aren't going to keep going, and I think that the real economy, you know, we've lost 4 million small businesses last year. The unemployment is still rampant. For the moment, people have been kept afloat by all kinds of pandemic giveaways, but that can't last forever, and pretty soon that runs out. At the end of April, I believe they keep extending it, but the moratorium on tenant eviction ends, and the part that hasn't surfaced yet is that the retail real estate, the shopping centers, the hotels, the office buildings, they all have huge vacancy, and the ones that still have tenants, the tenants aren't paying. The hotels are operating at less than 20% occupancy, and pretty soon those landlords are going to have difficulty making their mortgage payments, and then that becomes a real problem for the banks. So unlike 208, which was a residential real estate problem, this is going to be a commercial real estate problem where all the mortgages are in the multi-millions each.
Thank you. And getting back to the gold issue for a moment, we've all heard that they showed us the inside of Fort Knox and said, okay, there's the gold, nothing to worry about, it's all there. And then after that, everybody was like, oh yeah, how do we know that that wasn't just like maybe gold covered tungsten or maybe something else that you were playing us for a sap here. So I'm sure you've heard maybe about the gold covered tungsten issue and the idea that all the gold that's in Fort Knox and the other vaults isn't actually gold or isn't actually there. Do you know anything about that conspiracy theory?
Well, it's been prevalent because the reason you have the rise of the conspiracy theory is that if it's really there, and everybody from Ron Paul on down have tried to bring motions on to have it audited. So if it's not a problem, have it audited. Okay, but since they fight tooth and nail to have it audited, you can only come to the conclusion that it's not really necessarily there. Now, to audit gold isn't simply a matter of looking at it and saying, oh yeah, there's a bunch of bars here, so everything's okay. You've got to track the ownership of those bars and see who actually owns it. It's like I always say that if you've got a BMW in your garage, well, it doesn't make it yours just because it's in your garage. It's a leased BMW. So an audit has to go much further than simply a physical count of the bullion. And that hasn't been done since, I don't know, the early 50s.
Yeah, and let's turn back the clock a little past the 50s. Mike Maloney, who loves picking on people who use the words currency and money the wrong way, he did a fascinating presentation several months ago that I recommend everybody watch, called How the World Has Changed Since 1971. And he was, of course, referring to the Nixon shock of 71. And anybody who watches that presentation can easily deduce without question that the idea of taking away the dollar's convertibility to gold is a decision that can be described in one word, and that one word is stupid, because absolutely nothing good has come out of that for anybody. It's made the rich richer, the poor poorer, and it's destabilized the middle class more and more every day. So for those, but he also pointed out that not just him but others, that the reason so many people can't make sense of going on to the gold standard again is because so many people have lived their whole lives basically under the thumb of the Nixon shock. So the idea of going to a gold standard wouldn't make sense to them. And of course, the like when I said Donald Trump, I said his name again. He put a portrait of Willie McKinley in the White House before the end of his first term. Things were a lot different in that time when it was either the gold standard or a free silver standard, which McKinley's opponent William Jennings Bryan wanted. Free silver was not as bad as fractional reserve banking, but it would have been more reckless than the more stable gold standard that McKinley wanted, so that you can imagine the bankers would have certainly preferred the free silver candidate instead of McKinley. So I guess maybe they put Leon Czolgosz under mind control to assassinate McKinley. I'm getting a little conspiratorial here, but the whole idea of the world destabilizing since 1971 because of the Nixon shock, can you maybe elaborate on that, and how can we convince people that getting back to the gold standard would probably be the way to go?
Well, the issue is that if you go back to 71, you look at the amount, the money supply, the debt. There was no such thing as derivatives, and now we have, you know, in terms of the global debt stands at about 284 trillion, and representing is about 335% of GDP. So that couldn't have happened under a gold standard. But on top of that, we have the derivatives, and there's the gross value is like 15 quadrillion, whatever number that means. But even netting that out, there's about 600 trillion in derivatives. So under a gold standard, this couldn't have happened, and we're going to have the implosion of all time once all these paper derivatives and notes and money, you know, blows up. So it's just a question of time, like Warren Buffett called derivatives weapons of mass destruction, I think, back in 2008. And the thing that you mentioned is, in terms of the time frame, is that, you know, today when you look at most portfolio managers, hedge fund managers, etc., are in their 50s, and at that they have no memory of the 70s and what happened in the 70s right after the Nixon shock. So they just don't understand that there isn't a single university that teaches about monetary history and money and what it is other than the Mises Institute. There isn't any financial course that deals with a clear understanding of money. So this is like carpenters trying to build stuff out of wood without knowing what wood is.
Yes, getting back to derivatives, nobody understands derivatives. You try to come up with the definition of derivatives, the response you're sure to get is, okay, what does that mean in American? I had this guy, Winston Stroud, on my show. He's in jail right now for 10 years, apparently. But he did try to simplify the thing by saying a derivative is basically takes harmony out of zero. And what he meant by that is there's all the stuff in the world that can be valued in money, and all the money in the world that can pay for all that stuff. If you have true harmony, then they would cancel each other out and be zero. But when you add the derivatives into the factor, then it takes the harmony out of zero. That was a simplified explanation. But another thing I've noticed about derivatives, it seems like the only people that are opposed to derivatives are socialists, like Bernie Sanders and also Webster Tarpley. Webster Tarpley, a lot of people love him, hate him because of his socialist mentality, and everybody knows socialism never works better than capitalism in the real world, but they seem to be the only people that are against derivatives. And you could say that one of the major, if there is a flaw of capitalism, it's going to make the rich richer to the extent where the poor is going to suffer more, and it's going to cause the rich to say, well, that's not my problem, sucks for them. Well, it is a problem, because we're supposed to be our brother's keeper, if you know what I mean. We're supposed to love each other, and so how are we supposed to solve the derivatives problem?
The real problem with derivatives, which people get mistaken, is, so you've got the gross amount of derivatives, which is, let's say, 15 quadrillion, and the net amount of 600 trillion. But that's presuming that nobody goes bankrupt or insolvent. If one of the counterparties in the 15 quadrillion ceases to exist, that increases the net amount, because now you don't have a counterbalancing party to the whole thing. So everything works until it doesn't work. But it doesn't work when you have some major institutions and you've got all kinds of potential candidates in Europe, from Deutsche Bank to Credit Suisse, etc., that are, relatively in precarious position financially. So when one of them gets pulled out of the plug, then you have a cascading effect on the 15 quadrillion in derivatives.
You're saying 15 quadrillion. I remember back in the early part of the 20 teens decade, like 2012, 2013, 2014, people like Alex Jones are saying the number of derivatives could actually be like 3 quadrillion, but now you're saying it's up to 15 quadrillion. Uh,
Right.
so how did it get so high? Is it really just a matter of reckless gambling that's unregulated, or is it a lot more?
In the hyperdrive of the money printing, just look at how much money creation Biden's done in his first 100 days. It's historic numbers.
Yes, it is. And you mentioned earlier the idea of the stock market is kind of like we're in a bubble like we were in 1929. Well, there seems a little difference regarding the 1929 crash, and if there was a stock market crash today, it would not be like in 1929. It was said that the basically what happened was the Roaring Twenties happened because the bankers threw out the fishing line, so to speak. All the money that was on that fishing line was put into the system for people to use and engage in lovely spending to enhance their lives and have all the fun with it. But then the bankers reeled in the fishing line and took all the money out of the system. And then came the stock market crash from too little money in the system. But this time around, it would be the opposite. It would be a crash from hyperinflation, too much money in the system,
Right.
dollar being too devalued. Is that an accurate way of looking at it?
Well, that's what I think we're heading now, closer to a hyperinflation, but we could have a hyper stagflation if we have that, because then we could have an inflation in terms of the cost of everything and the increase in money supply at the same time as you have low economic activity. And this is the thing that in the 1.9 trillion that was supposed to be COVID relief, only a small part of that was actually COVID relief. A lot of it was also a bunch of pet projects of the administration. But the thing is, at some point down the road, they're going to have to really print a lot of money to get all the businesses that failed in 2020 and 2021 back and running. So that's a number that's probably 5 times the amount that they've already done.
All right, and now another form of well, you're saying you're using the word money. Mike Maloney would love to slap you across the face for not using the word currency there. But I know some people say, "What's the big deal?" He's obsessing. But another thing that could be money is silver. And I'd like to talk about this because you have done some interviews here. I'm seeing on YouTube some recent interviews about the silver squeeze. Ever since that whole GameStop short squeeze happened, a lot of people have come up with the idea, okay, let's do the same thing with silver. And a lot of people, including me, actually, I tried to jump on the bandwagon myself, buying a lot of silver coins with the lion on it from Singapore. And they say, well, the silver squeeze isn't working. Well, maybe it is working. It's just that these things take time to play out, like inflation. If you dump a lot of currency into an economy, it's gonna.
See, we have a kind of dual market in terms of both gold and silver. There's the paper price of gold and silver, and there's the physical price. Now, the closest thing when you value something, you need a lot of sales to say, okay, this is the price. You have to have a large number of categories. So the closest thing you can come to that is to look at what silver coins are selling on eBay and Amazon. So while the spot price is 27 bucks, I think the average price on eBay and Amazon is 50. And,
Okay.
and those are, widely distributed numbers where a lot of people are participating and paying and so on. So that gives you a real indication of what the price should be. But at the same time, when you look at the gold-silver ratio, the long-term average is about 40 to 1. The ratio of gold to silver in the ground is about 16 to 1. And the current gold to silver price is about 80 to 1. So we've got a long, like the price of silver has to approximately double just to get back to the mean of 40 to 1.
Yeah, and this thing you're mentioning about, excuse me, that the paper price of gold and silver is different than the true metal price. That reminds me, I wanted to ask you about this, and maybe you could knock some sense into my dear sweet mama and old man, because I'm a bachelor living on a garage apartment on his parents' property, and I'm paying rent to my parents, and they told me that they want me to pay them in dollars, nothing else, dollars. But to be honest with you, I would actually prefer to be buying them gold and silver coins. And I told them I'll happily buy you gold and silver coins, and whatever the difference is that remains, I'll pay you in cash. And they said, no, we want dollars. Well, if what you're saying about the price of gold and silver is actually more valuable than the paper price, then my parents' decision to turn down my offer to buy them gold and silver to pay the majority of my rent is stupid. So could you perhaps knock some sense in my parents and tell them your son Andrew is trying to do you a big favor by paying you in gold and silver? Why should they take up my offer?
Well, the issue is that the dollars are going to depreciate. They've already depreciated about 90% since 1971 in terms of purchasing power, and the prices of gold and silver are going to keep rising. So if you have the dollars are fine because they're convenient for the time being in terms of using as liquidity to buy stuff and so on and so forth. But if they don't need the money, if they're just accumulating the dollars, then they're a lot better off to accumulate physical gold or silver.
Yes, and also the idea that we could cause the silver short squeeze by buying gold and by buying silver. Tell me, does you necessarily have to be very stingy and picky with where you're buying the silver from? Because I personally, even though it may cost a little more, I like to buy a lot of sterling silver jewelry from the website Novica, because I know that when I buy that, I'm helping a lot of impoverished people who need to, from third world countries, who make silver jewelry as a job. And not only that, being a spiritual but not religious guy who believes in metaphysical stuff, I know that sterling silver jewelry does have some spiritual qualities if you hang it all around your house. And it's not just the money factor, it's the spiritual essence factor, so that even though it may cost a little more in terms of the weight, it's good to buy some silver from Novica. But if you're trying to cause a silver short squeeze, is it the case that buying sterling silver jewelry off Novica is not going to help with that? You actually need to buy like 99.9% silver or junk silver off of genuine bullion dealers.
Well, in terms of doing something about the short squeeze, because the short squeeze would happen at the SLV ETF, and the SLV ETF, just like our funds do, we buy only 1,000 ounce silver bars. So these are, London Good Delivery bars, and that's what the SLV buys. That's what it's in that you would create the short squeeze. The likes of the SLV aren't buying coins, neither are we. like coins are a good thing for individuals to buy and own, but in terms of funds, any short squeeze would happen at the large bar level. Now you mentioned the spiritual aspect of silver, but what a lot of people don't realize, and particularly with COVID, is the benefits of colloidal silver. So colloidal silver is just 5 parts per million silver in distilled water. But there's no known virus, bacteria, or fungus that can survive that. Now, all the studies, people say, well, where are the studies? Well, all the studies for that are done in the water purification business, because silver is used in water purification extensively, and a lot of studies and everything are done there. And if you use colloidal silver in a nebulizer, you can stop the flu, the cold in its tracks, within a day. I've been using it for 10 years, so that's a big part of silver, although it's a very small amount, but that's a big part, the antibacterial, antifungal properties of silver that a lot of people aren't aware of.
I myself take 1 drop of 500 parts per million colloidal silver a day, one of the densest qualities, and I know that's not going to cause any problems. It's not going to make my skin turn blue. It's too low a dose to cause that. They say don't take too much.
But you're better off in a nebulizer. You can buy portable nebulizers at Amazon for $50. They create a very fine mist. You put colloidal silver in them, and then you get this mist, so that disinfects all your lungs. By drinking it, the silver can get deactivated in the stomach and never get into the bloodstream or the lungs or any of that. For silver to work, it's got to be in contact with the virus or bacteria.
All right, let's switch gears, talk about the stock market a little bit. I've done a lot of work with the stock market myself recently, because I've got a IRA and a 401k. The 401k in particular, there's a penalty if you take out the money before you turn 65 years old. There's a big fee you got to pay. However, you can kind of circumvent that if you put the 401k money into the stock market, and I've put the majority of that money into gold and silver mining stocks. But if the stock market were to crash, am I totally screwed?
Yeah, because in the past, when we looked at the previous crashes, whether it's 2000 or 2008, we had situations where the mining stocks tanked by a bigger amount than the broad equity markets did, and at the time gold and silver were rising. Now in the U.S., there's a number of people that you can hold coins and gold and silver in your IRAs. We're looking into establishing some of that ourselves for the U.S. market, but so there's some people already doing that. So my view is that if you can hold bullion for the time being, it will rise as the equity markets decline, and at that point, buying the mining stock will be the bargain of a lifetime. You switch your bullion holdings at that point into some mining stocks, but you don't want to be holding them before the equity crash.
Thank you for that advice. And another bit of, on a related note, I also have an IRA, and I wanted to convert all of my IRA money into gold, but I actually received a threat from my old man, and I love my old man, my dear sweet mama, but they seem to be kind of brainwashed when it comes to finances, not just living under the thumb of the Nixon shock and all that, but other things as well. One case, after I wanted to convert all of my money into gold, I actually got a threat from my father who told me something I wasn't aware of, that he was actually giving me $10,000 a year in money to put in my IRA. Lucky me. And I was like, well, thank you very much. I love you a lot more for that. But then he told me, if you convert all that money into gold, I'm not giving you $10,000 a year anymore. I want you to be diversified, sonny boy. And I'm like, what a jerk of a father you are.
So,
Come on,
so
give me a break. I mean, what harm can it possibly do for me to convert all that money into gold, knowing that it's definitely going to be a lot more valuable by the time I turn 65? So is he making a stupid mistake?
I'll send you a copy of my book and audio CD, and you can give that to your dad.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind. You got my email, right? From the
Well, I'm presuming Monica has your address and everything, so.
yeah, you can also send it to me on Skype. All
Sure.
right, so yeah, I'll try to. Not that I think he's gonna read it, but maybe he'll learn something from
Well,
it.
the audio, it's a full audio CD, so he can play that in his car or whatever. It's a lot easier than reading the whole book, so either one.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's talk about some other precious metals. You mentioned platinum. I remember a day in the not too distant past when platinum was more valuable than gold in terms of its price, but then I remember seeing a graph that showed this, where it looked like an X in the graph, where I don't remember the exact year or time frame it was, where platinum became less valuable than gold. How did that happen, and is that going to continue for a while? And what's your advice on people who think about investing in the platinum business?
Well, platinum, if we look at its performance over the last, let's say, 6 months, it's been outperforming both gold and silver. And the issue for platinum is that, I mean, platinum has been money. It was money in Russia for 300 years. So that's why in our fund, the original fund, we hold gold, silver, and platinum, because it's those three metals that have histories of being money in different places. Gold and silver, obviously, but like I say, platinum was money for 300 years in Russia. But the main industrial uses of platinum are for catalytic converters for diesel cars. For gas-powered cars, you can use palladium or platinum, but for diesel, you have to have platinum. Now, there's been a bit of a reduction in demand for the big diesels all over the world, more and more the demand rising for electric vehicles and so on. So that part has had an adjustment, but sooner or later, platinum has to, normalize to its long-term mean, which is typically several $100s higher than gold.
Yes, and what's the deal with Palladium and Rhodium? I've seen them as for sale on some sites like Money Metals Exchange, but you never really hear about them much. So why don't you hear about them much? And does the fact you don't hear about them much mean that it's really not worth it compared to gold, silver, and platinum too?
Well, those are strictly commodities. They've never been monetary assets like gold, silver, and platinum. But they're in short supply, so that you're having price increases. You get palladium and rhodium, but you also have iridium and all kinds of exotic metals like that aren't typically in anybody's portfolios, unless you're a commodities trader.
And also copper. They call it poor man's gold or poor man's silver, but some have asserted maybe copper's worth investing in, like particularly if there's going to be if there is going to be an attempt to fix America's crumbling infrastructure, then copper may get a little more worthwhile to invest in because it's going to be used more. Do you see any sense in investing in copper, or is it just like too much room to take up for?
I think it's a pretty strong bet to be investing in commodities, because as you print more and more money, then the prices, particularly of commodities, are going to increase. So many analysts feel we're in the beginnings of a long-term bull market in basically all commodities.
Okay, and if we are to, let's just say hypothetically, at some point in the future, there would be some sort of a switch to in the financial system to have a currency reset where you get on a gold or silver standard. Now, I used to joke around by saying if that were to happen, let's max out our credit cards to buy as much gold and silver as we possibly can, and then when the currency reset happens, we don't have to pay our debts back because all that money in the old financial system will be eliminated with a push of a button, which means all of our debts will be eliminated with a push of a button, and we'll get to keep all that gold and silver that we bought. I have since retracted that, realizing from a spiritual standpoint that that is flat out stupid, because I have reason to believe that credit cards are God's way of seeing how well humans can manage their karma. And even though your debt may be eliminated by the push of a delete button in the computer, you're still going to have generated a lot of bad karma by buying so much gold and silver that you have no intention of paying back, and you cheated the system by using your credit cards to to buy it all. But
a realistic way of looking at it is that because rates are so low, so borrow the money today, buy the gold and silver. When it goes up many times, then sell some and pay off your debt. There's no karmic problem with that.
Yeah, I can't argue with that. Although some people have told me I should consider selling my gold to pay off what credit card debt I have, but I feel more confident that I can actually pay it off just by keeping working and using the money there to pay it off. And I've also made it clear, don't use your credit. I do not advise people use their credit cards to buy gold and silver until the credit card is at zero. Only then can you make the argument that you can reasonably afford to use your credit card to buy the gold and silver. But I had this other guy on my show recently who runs the site dollarcollapse.com, drawing a blank on his name, but he also said that if you're talking about like a financial reset of sorts like this, it wouldn't be fair to the creditors to cheat out of not paying back all the money that you paid to buy that gold and silver. They're going to be like, okay, where's my money? You use this credit card to pay for this stuff. Now you have to pay me. Well, okay, let's say that if we were to do a financial reset, let's say, and this may be wishful thinking, but imagine for a moment that there's a lot of technology that is being suppressed, which could provide for everybody, so we don't have to work a 9-to-5 anymore to get our basic needs. If that were the case, that technology was released, and there wouldn't be any more starving children in Africa anymore because everybody could get whatever they needed with the aid of this technology, then we could make the argument to the creditors, hey, stop bitching about us not giving your money. Everybody on planet Earth gets what they need right now because the technology that is being suppressed has been released. You got nothing to bitch and complain about. Just be happy that you can get what you want and let us not have to pay you back the money that you claim we owe us, because we don't owe you squat now because we had a financial reset and everybody should be happy that we get everything. So I know it's wishful thinking, may seem
depends on how there's the financial reset and there's possible an overall reset. The financial reset is simply a question where the US dollar loses its reserve status and it's replaced by something. So it could be replaced by the IMF receipts and so on. So then all they're going to say is that, give us 1,000 of the old dollars and we're going to give you one of the new dollars. So that's how the reset mechanism could take place. They're just not going to say you're forgiven for all your debts. But the second part, that there's a lot of conspiracy theories that the reset is a population reset. And Bill Gates has talked about that there's too many people on Earth, and you reset that by getting rid of 4 to 5 billion people, and go to AI and robots and everything else, because then you don't need them. So that gets us into like a very frightening scenario, if that's the real agenda of the Great Reset.
Well, when we're talking about agendas, many people may remember there's visions, and I'm sure there's more than one movie that's shown this, where there's Nikola Tesla trying to show his technology, which could provide for everybody many, many decades ago. And you can imagine J.P. Morgan and the tycoons with their feet up on their desks, smoking their cigars, saying, Tesla, I'm not interested in your little box that provides every energy to everybody on the city block. There's no profit in that. And the conspiratorial people assert that it is the bankers who are suppressing all the technology that can provide for everybody. Okay, that's a whole new can of worms there. But if that is the case, then what do you got to do to wake up humanity to stop being apathetic couch potatoes and shut down the banks in a heartbeat, and then stop saying the banks aren't too big to fail? We don't need to use that excuse, because all we have to do to make them not be able to use that excuse is release the technology that they're suppressing that could provide for everybody. So, any ideas there?
Well, I don't know that you can ever get to the point where you can take the existing population and provide them with everything they want, because like I say, the world's environment to some extent is not going to handle the population growth.
Yeah, there's a lot of people debate whether or not the world is overpopulated. You hear that the entire world population could fit comfortably in the state of Texas with room to spare, but that's kind of a silly way of looking at it. I mean, considering that people like Mike Ruppert, the late Mike Ruppert, have said that the population boom on this earth has a lot to do with oil. And, well, someone like me would say, well, that's kind of disturbing when you realize that oil, we could make oil obsolete if we released all the other technology out there that could provide for everybody and not hurt the environment in the process. But then again, is there really a conspiracy by the bankers to keep that technology suppressed? Well, maybe there is. So when it comes to
the movies, there's Thrive 1 and Thrive 2. That cover a lot of that discussion. They're very well done.
I think I've seen both Thrive 1 and Thrive 2. Definitely encourage people to check it out. And well, great things could be in store for humanity if we could all find ways to get along a little better. And since you mentioned immigration, they say open borders doesn't work in the real world. Well, why is that? Well, there's two reasons, I think. One, people speak different languages. You can't have people speaking different languages all hodgepodge with each other, because they're not going to understand each other. You want to come to a country, you better learn the official language sooner rather than later. And the second thing has to do with different currencies. Just look what happened when America was founded after the American Revolution under the Articles of Confederation. It was a recipe for disaster, because all the states had different currencies, and the founding fathers realized this isn't going to work out. We need to unify the states into a collective whole under one currency, and that was when the Constitution was created, and they unified it all under one currency. And one of the arguments is if open borders could work in the real world, if people all spoke the same language, and there was either no money or there was money, but it was all just one universal currency. So do you see that being possible in the possible future, near or far future?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I don't think it will happen in my lifetime anyways.
I'd like to think that it could, but maybe a little harder for humanity to get along well.
Better than me, so it might.
maybe in my lifetime. Also, let's talk about the cryptocurrency thing. It has been said that Bitcoin is not really a good medium of exchange, and it has to do with the router. But you're seeing all these people like Elon Musk and even the big banks like Goldman Sachs seem to be jumping on the Bitcoin bandwagon, and Bitcoin's not the only cryptocurrency out there. I personally prefer to just stick with gold and silver, but I have created some accounts on Bitcoin trading sites in the event that the time comes where it becomes maybe a more prominent currency that you better jump on the bandwagon if you want to do any trade. So if
The thing is, I investigated digital currencies probably 15 years ago, and they came away with the conclusion that every single digital currency that is being tried, the major thing that made it attractive on one hand is the anonymity became its death knell in the end, because sooner or later the money launderers, the drug dealers, the pornographers start using the digital currency, and then the government comes in and locks it down and arrests everybody remotely involved on it. So the government, people that think they're going to allow this, is when you have a monopoly on creating currency, there's no way you're going to allow a competitor like Bitcoin or any of the others to exist. Eventually, they're going to shut them down for one reason or another.
Yes, and I think we'll give one more question out here and then we'll call it a show. But you mentioned money laundering, and there's more than enough evidence out there, I think, to say that money laundering laws were not created for the reasons that we're led to believe they created. In reality, they were created to hassle and harass the everyday common people into how they manage their money in a real perfect world where it's the only law is do no harm. Everybody would have the right to do whatever they wanted with their money. And if somebody said, well, where's the money going or where's it coming from, you would have the right to say, none of your business. I don't have to answer that. It's my money. I do what I want with it. So, is there any truth to that? Money laundering laws exist only to hassle and harass the common person. And if that is the case, well, what in the world are we supposed to do to abolish money laundering laws so we can actually live in a free society?
After 9/11, of course, that gave them the perfect crisis to introduce all the new laws that not only restricted our use of money, but also our liberties and freedom and surveillance and everything else. So that's the typical routine when you're not letting a good crisis go to waste.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think your answer there is short, sweet, and to the point. So, all right, we've almost reached the hour mark, and of course, I upload these interviews to Cost.tv, and they only allow for an hour upload. So this is kind of convenient if it doesn't reach the hour mark, and I delete all the chit chat I had with you before the official start of the show. Then it'll allow me to not have to break this up into 2 uploads. So I guess we'll end the interview now. Great having you on. Why don't you get out anything you'd like to get out? You can plug your contact info and everything. If you want to make some sort of a sales pitch out of anything, if there's anything you sell on your site, by all means, let people know. The people can look for your site. There's a Griffin logo. Look for the Griffin. That's the way to find it. So why don't you plug that all?
We really have 2 sites. One is the BMG group site. And the other one is the BMG DIY investor site, which is an informational site for do-it-yourself investors. So there's an enormous amount of information there. So that's a second site that people can go to.
Okay, Nick. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Having you on, and I'll upload this to YouTube. It'll be public for everybody in about 2 to 3 weeks. Hopefully, maybe somebody will want to subscribe on Patreon to listen to it earlier. I'll send you a link as well if you want to upload it to YouTube on any channels you may have. By all means.
And send me if you got Monica's email and everything. Send your physical address so we can send the book and the CD to.
All right. Thank you very much. Take care
Okay.
and good luck. Bye-bye.
Okay, take care.